The Polish Intermarium was a post-World War I plan to create a Polish-led geopolitical entity in Eastern and Southern European states. The proposed multinational political entity would have incorporated territories lying between the Baltic, Black, and Adriatic Seas, hence the name Intermarium meaning between the seas. It can be somewhat described as an Eastern European NATO vision for the interwar years, but it failed in our timeline. At the end of World War I, Polish General Józef Pilsudski conceived of a geopolitical strategy of Prometheism where Poland undermines the Russian Empire and later Soviet Union by supporting separatist nationalist movements in the dismembered Russian Empire. Pilsudski saw an Intermarium federation as a counterweight to Russian and German imperialism. Pilsudski's plan faced opposition from virtually all quarters of the global stage. The Soviets, whose sphere of influence was directly threatened, worked to thwart the Intermarium agenda. The Allied powers assumed that Bolshevism was only a temporary threat. Boy, were they wrong. And they did not want to see their important geopolitical ally, White Russia, from a balance of power viewpoint, weakened. They resented Pilsudski's refusal to aid the Whites in the Russian Civil War as they viewed Pilsudski with suspicion and saw his plans as completely unrealistic. Additionally, Poland fought the Polish-Lithuanian War and the Polish-Ukrainian War, as well as various other border disputes with Czechoslovakia. In contrast to Poland, Czechoslovakia was able to create its own alliance called the Little Entente with Romania and Yugoslavia from 1921 to 1938. But the point is, Poland had issues with all of its neighbors. In the aftermath of the Polish-Soviet War from 1919 to 1921 and the establishment of the Ukrainian USSR, Pilsudski's concept of a federation of Central and Eastern European countries based on a Polish-Ukrainian axis lost any chance of realization, and the Intermarium was gone forever. So, what conditions can we change to make the Intermarium successful? First, during the Russian Civil War, we can have Poland send some aid to the Baltic states to support their independence movements, and now Poland has good relations with all of their neighbors, such as Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, who are willing to hear Pilsudski out for the Intermarium. Prometheism is also dialed up to 11, and the Entente sees it as a good way for Poland supporting anti-Bolshevik forces instead of undermining Russia. Poland will send military support to Ukraine and the Allied interventions in northern and southern Russia, as well as to White Army generals that can be either puppeted or that Poland knows will be in no position to become the next Tsar, but are just competent enough to hold back the Bolsheviks for as long as possible. So now we have an Intermarium, but what states are a part of it? Realistically, we can include the Baltic states, Czechoslovakia if Poland swallows its pride, Hungary if some land concessions are met, Romania and Yugoslavia assuming the Intermarium can be an expansion of the Little Entente. This Intermarium is kind of like an interwar version of NATO. It can expand later into Scandinavia and throughout Southern Europe, but there's already enough different political views among the member states. Now for the real reason that you came to this video. How does the Intermarium impact an alternate World War II and beyond in this scenario? In our timeline, Poland had wanted to go to war with Germany when it started to remilitarize with radical elements, such as the Nazis. However, France refused and Poland backed down. In this alternate timeline, the Intermarium goes to war with Germany in the mid-1930s. How does this war go? Well, Polish resources are combined with those of the Intermarium in the pre-war years to support Prometheism to weaken Nazi Germany in the early years before the war begins. Therefore, Germany has elements along the Polish border that are more open to rebellion, or possible that there are security forces defections that occur within the German ranks, and this makes a Polish invasion of Germany easier after Germany obviously rejects conditions to prevent war, as a certain angry mustache model felt that Germany would win and was superior no matter what. The Western Allies were still following appeasement, and a Polish invasion of Germany to enforce Versailles would probably not bother France or Britain as they are feeling the Great Depression and don't want another world war to start. With Germany demilitarized, the Germans are more angry than ever and want revenge against the Intermarium, but are completely defeated for trying to foil the Treaty of Versailles. Germany is left in ruins as it's hard to predict what agenda the Intermarium occupation would follow in Germany. The German Intermarium War, however, leaves the Allies to maintain appeasement for a while as there have been no consequences to following appeasement, and the Intermarium showed the teeth to the Treaty of Versailles, so the Allies really definitely haven't felt any consequences yet. Italy, however, is still a fascist state, and the Allies appeased Mussolini's land claims in Ethiopia and Albania, but Italy holds back from making any claims in Intermarium territory as Germany was just beat senseless. This means that Italy remains a fascist state for a while and supports Franco in the Spanish Civil War. Although this war is expensive and heavily hits the Intermarium during the Great Depression, there is still other threats that are looming which would take precedence. The USSR during the interwar years heavily remilitarizes as the Intermarium is fiercely anti-Soviet, and many member states had fought against the Bolsheviks for independence. Additionally, the border between the USSR and Intermarium is heavily militarized, and the Intermarium is conducting clandestine operations in Ukraine and Belarus as part of Prometheism. This alternate war between the Intermarium and USSR is very hard to predict, but I would say that it could happen if the Intermarium agents are caught in Ukraine or Belarus, and it becomes a provocation for war between the two by the Soviets, who launch an invasion of Poland. Another possible start of the war could be where Finland attempts to join the Intermarium and the Soviets respond with an invasion. The details of this war would be very difficult to predict, but the Soviet military is in such a poor state. Just look at how the Winter War and Operation Barbarossa went in our timeline. Meanwhile, the Intermarium military has experience from Germany, the Wars of Independence, and the Russian Civil War without having had all their competent officers purged, like the Soviets did. Furthermore, the Allies would back the Intermarium over the Soviets. This is where alternate World War II really begins. World War II in the Pacific could go relatively the same. Japan could take advantage of the USSR's weak state during and after the Soviet Intermarium War, depending on how long the war goes and what happens and when it starts. But Japan would have a lot of problems on their own with China and resource usage. However, I couldn't fully predict World War II in the Pacific at this point, as the further we drive from our timeline, the harder it becomes to predict in the alternate timeline. Japan's views on the West, the Soviet Union, and other areas are altered, and there are no Axis powers in this timeline. This is where I'll end the scenario. With World War II in Europe between the Soviets and Intermarium currently supported by the Allies, there could be a lot of things that completely shake up the geopolitics of the world, as small changes in the alternate war might have massive consequences, as the West isn't completely unified, as we have the Allies, neutral fascist Italy, America doing its thing, and the Soviet Union fighting for survival of communism. What do you think would have happened had the Intermarium been successful? How do you think it would have been accomplished, and what do you think the results would have been? Let me know in the comments, and thank you for watching.